Greetings all, welcome back to another session of TESOL methods and materials. Today we're going to be looking at classroom-based assessment. We're going to look at some ways that we can do assessments in the class as well as developing our own materials. As I mentioned in an earlier session about norm reference tests, these are the type of tests that compare one person to a group, returns a generic or a rated scale or a percentile, things like the SAT, the ACT, and of course the tests that we're interested in, the TOEFL and the TOEIC. Those tests are a little more difficult to create because you need so many people to take your test to ensure reliability and validity. Criterion reference tests, however, give feedback to specific course content, things that you're actually teaching in the class, and things that you can measure. These are the types of things that we can create as far as assessments and tests and research. Okay? Some practical steps when we're going to try to create a test is that we need to have things written down and prepared before we even begin to write the actual test questions. You should have clear guidelines. You should list your guidelines so that they can be definable and measurable. Make sure that you can create a test question that attacks or addresses at least one of the measurable objectives. You should develop test specifications based on those objectives. You should develop ways of defining what constitutes a legal question. So, for example, if you're dealing with a matching type of question, you should have rules that state, how many questions are required to be in it. How many options are required to be in it to be a valid test question. If you're doing a multiple choice question, how many distractors are you allowed to have? And how are the distractors supposed to be created? That kind of rule should be established so that when you're building the questions, you have consistency. So after you have the objectives and the rules for creating the test questions, you go ahead and draft the test. You should try to draft the test in such a way that you would try to ensure some reliability. This may mean that when you work at developing a test question for a particular objective, that you develop one or two or possibly even three questions to address that one issue. It may be that the student will answer one of your issues and it could be a guess. He may not actually know what it is, so you want to have multiple questions. In any event, you want to draft the test. Write up the test, whether it's digitally or paper-based. But after you write it up, then hand it off to somebody and have them review it. Have them tell you what's missing or what's needed to make it a better test so that you can revise it. And after you've reviewed and revised it a couple times, then you can go ahead and you publish that test. Go use that test and check the answers, see the score, see how it works, okay? And make sure that when you're offering this test that you try to create rich washback. Make sure that when your students take this test, they can learn from it, they can get some impetus to study more, and that they can also learn about what their weaknesses are. This is just a guideline for creating a test. Make sure that when you have when you're building a test that you try to go through some of these points to make it an even better test. You're giving your students a test, make sure that you give them some test-taking strategies. Show them ways for taking a test, before, during, and after. Ways that they can make sure they get to every question, for example. There are some rules as far as not staying too long on a particular question. If a question slows you down, you skip that. You go to the next question. Come back and get that one later. Try to get through everything at least one time. Try to constantly be using your brain. If something's causing you to slow down and not think, skip it. Go on to the next one. What do you do after you finish? You go back and check your answers again. What do you do before, right? Also talk about that gut feeling that people have. I believe research indicates that the majority of times when you're not sure, oftentimes your first gut reaction is going to be the correct one. Rather interesting, I think. Make sure that you try to establish face validity. Make sure that your students believe that it's actually a test that's designed to test what it's intended to, and it looks that way so that they find it believable and that they will work at it. Try to design authentic tasks, things that your students will believe are things that are done in the native language, a type of test that a native speaker would take, for example. And again, work for washback. Test is only good. A test is going to give you a grade. Test is going to tell you maybe where the student is. But it's a better test is going to be one that provides washback for the students that helps them improve their language. So try to get something that's going to give some type of diagnostic or encouragement to do better the next time, right? Alternatives to your standard test are numerous. Some of these are more qualitative in nature, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we should include qualitative involved. As I mentioned before, triangulation is very good, where you have qualitative and quantitative assessments that you can combine to get a more robust, a richer description of a student's language abilities. Some type of alternative assessments include portfolios, where students can put into their portfolio work that they have done and revised, and they can choose. Student-teacher conferences, another way that you can assess somebody is by doing a conference where they can talk and possibly defend or explain why they did or what they did or didn't do. You can use observations and checklists, and that's an assessment just by watching someone in class what they're doing and check off things. I've even noticed where I had a teacher, a friend of mine, who was using a checklist. And students began to watch him as they were seeing people talk and whatever, and whenever they would see a check go off, they were like, oh, this person got a point for doing something. They got credit for doing something. And it encouraged them to want that same check. So I thought it was quite interesting. Don't know if there's any research on that. Finally, you can do peer assessments, have the peers assess one another. They need to be trained in how to do that. And self-assessment. Self-assessment, if done honestly, can actually help students to be metalinguistic, to think about the language, to be metacognitive, to think about what they're doing as far as language learning, and hopefully it'll encourage them to go forward with more language learning. There are a variety of assessments that you can do beyond just the test and the interview, okay, so some that are listed here. Why use alternative assessments? I've already mentioned that you get triangulation, right? You're going to maximize practicality and reliability. You're going to increase reliability because you're going to be able to see it from different vantage points using the qualitative and the quantitative data. You provide a more robust assessment. You have the advantages, again, of having both, and I would agree with that. It ensures that the performance is valid and practical. Okay, because you're providing that balance on both sides. By the way, when you're giving a performance assessment, please do not create a bun-only comment sandwich. And by that I mean you've got praise here and you've got praise here. So at the beginning you say, hey, you did a good job, and then you give no criticism or help in between, and then you end it with saying, hey, you did a good job. It's just praise upon praise. You want to have some meat inside this criticism so that you help them become a better language learner, help them become a better language user. And so don't simply have bun-only comments. You want to have some meat in there that's going to help them do better. And that's all I have for classroom-based assessments. Again, much of this material is coming out of Brown's textbook here. If you do have any questions regarding it, you should get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to help you. Have a nice day now.